So today we're going to continue our discussion about competition by focusing on competition in the long run. We talked about competition in the short run last time, and the key difference, there's going to be two key differences about competition in the long run, one sort of trivial and one more important. The first key difference about competition in the long run is there's no shutdown rule. That is, remember, no, I shouldn't say there's no shutdown rule. That's the wrong way to put it. That basically, let me think of the right way to. So basically, there's sort of a simpler shutdown rule. Let's put it that way. Simpler shutdown rule, which is, we talked last time about the fact that even if you were losing money in the short term, you might keep your company open because you've paid those fixed costs anyway, and maybe you'll make money at some point. In the long run, if you're losing money, you should shut down. And once you've adjusted everything you could adjust, if you're still losing money, you should shut down. So we talked in the short run about the shutdown rule being you should shut down if price is less than average variable cost. That is, if the cost of producing the next unit, on average, the cost of producing the marginal, on average, the cost of producing a unit, the variable costs are greater than the price, then there's no way you can make money. In the long run, it's simpler. In the long run, you simply shut down if price is less than average cost. Okay? So basically, if you're losing money, if revenues are less than costs, you shut down. Okay? So because there's no fixed cost in the long run. Okay? Some costs you've paid and those are ignored from you've already gone to med school. That's too late. Now you just want to ask yourself, are you losing money as a doctor? Okay? If you're losing money, you should get out of the business. If you're making money, you can stay in. Okay? So that's basically the simple, it's much more simple shutdown rule in the long run. It's the intuition we have where you're losing money, get out of the business. Okay? So that's the sort of simpler aspect. That's the sort of trivial aspect that's different in the long run. The more interesting aspect that's different in the long run is now we have entry and exit. And that's very interesting and exciting. And that leads us to think about how entry and exit will affect the dynamics we set up in the short run. Okay? So how entry and exit will affect those dynamics. Okay? In the long run, firms can decide whether to leave the market or come into the market. And fundamentally, what we're going to argue is that decision is going to be a function of the profits being made in that market. We're going to argue that in a competitive market, firms will enter if there's profits being made and exit if there's money being lost. Okay? And what I'm going to prove to you now is that in the long run, in a perfectly competitive market, firms will enter and exit until profits are zero. That in the long run, entry and exit in a competitive market drive profits to zero. Okay? So in the long run, entry and exit drives profit to zero in the long run. Okay? And that's what we're going to spend the first part of this lecture talking about. So to see that, we're going to work from an example, which is we're going to think about we're going to think about the computer market circa around 1990. Okay, let's think about the market for PCs circa around 1990. Were you guys born yet? No, you weren't born yet. No, it's way long ago for you guys. Okay, so think about 1990, cast your mind back to the era of your grandparents or whatever. I don't know, it's just depressing. Okay, whatever. So cast your mind back to 1990, the market for PCs. So the way things work, let's look at figure 11.1. In figure 11.1, this is kind of a confusing figure, so we're going to work through it slowly. Okay, so in 1990, PCs were just starting. Okay, most of the computing, when I was in graduate school, undergraduate, the computing I did were big mainframe servers. People didn't have PCs. PCs were just sort of getting started in the early 1990s. And let's think about how we model that market. So what I'm going to assume is, let's assume to make life easy that all PC producers are identical. Let's assume all PC producers are identical, just to make life easy. So it's just a question of how many of them are in the market or not. Okay? So let's say that you have, let's take Dell as one example. They were an early PC entrant. And let's say that the left-hand side of figure 11.1 shows their marginal cost and average cost. So this is just, I've just drawn a marginal cost and average cost curve for Dell, okay, as the participant in this PC market. Okay? Now, what I've got on the right-hand panel is the market diagram. So note I have little q's on the left and big q's on the right. On the left is the quantities produced by Dell. On the right is the quantities produced by every participant in the PC market. Let's say that those, if you add up all the supply curves for all the participants in the PC market, you get SR1. SR1 is the short run supply curve, adding up all the supply curves from the guys in the short run or in the PC market. Okay? And let's say that interacts demand at a quantity big Q1. So that the market price is P1. Okay? So we're going to go back and forth. Right gives us the market. Left gives us the firm. The market determines the price. Remember, firms are price takers in competitive markets. So the market gives us the price. The market gives us the price by where supply equals demand. Supply equals demand at a price of P1. Okay? Now we can carry that price over to the left and say Dell will choose to produce where that price, which it is given, because it's a price taker, equals its marginal cost. So Dell will choose to produce little Q1 computers. Okay? Are there questions about where that came from? We're taking the market equilibrium to give us a price. We get that price, we carry that price over to the firm's decision. The firm chooses to produce where price equals marginal cost, which is Q1. At that price and quantity, the firm earns profits because that marginal cost is well above its average cost. So it's earning profits, which are the lightly shaded, lightly dotted area. That's the difference between price and average cost times the quantity it's selling. So this is the initial state of the world. Dell is earning profits at the market price. Okay? Questions about that setup? Now, in the short run, we'd stop. Dell would be happy earning profits. It certainly wouldn't shut down. There's no shutdown rule to worry about. It's all good. Now we move to the long run. In the long run, the difference is that companies realize that there's money to be made in the PC profits and in the PC market, and they enter. What we showed last time is that as more firms enter, the supply curve flattens. As more firms enter, the supply curve flattens. So we move from SR1 to SR2. Okay? So what happens now is entry occurs. That has no effect on the left because Dell is just Dell. But it has an effect on the market. The supply curve flattens. And that flatter supply curve now intersects the demand curve at a higher quantity and lower price. Big Q2 and price P2. At that new price P2, Dell chooses to produce little Q2. Dell produces less. So here's the thing. Market quantity Q has gone up from big Q1 to big Q2. But Dell's production, little q, has gone down from little q1 to little q2. That is, every company is producing less, but overall the market's producing more because there's more companies. Okay? So every company like Dell's producing somewhat less, but there's more companies, so overall there's a bigger queue in the market. There's more seats up here if folks want seats. There's plenty of seats up in the middle here. Okay? So Dell now is only producing little Q2. They're producing that where their price, where P2 equals their marginal cost, which is at little Q2. They're still making profits, but they're a lot lower. They're still making profits, but their profits are a lot lower. Now instead of that larger sort of dotted rectangle, it's just the smaller shaded rectangle. Okay? That's what happened. Questions about that change? Now, what you can see is this process, even at P2, Dell still makes money. So what will happen? More entry. There will always be entry as long as, in a perfectly competitive market, there will always be entry as long as there's profit to be made. More entry further flattens the supply curve. And as you can see, this project will continue, this process will continue until you've reached the point where there's no more profits to be made. And what point is that? What point is that? At what point will Dell not make profits? Where price always equals marginal cost. That's true at that point. But what else? Someone raise their hand and tell me. Yeah.
Price equals average total cost.
Yeah. where marginal costs and average costs are intersect and prices at that point. Dell is no longer going to make profits at the point where the marginal cost curve hits the average cost curve. Dell will no longer make profits at that point. So by definition, entry will drive Dell to that point. Will drive them to making no profits. What's interesting about average costs at the point where they equal marginal costs? What do we note about average costs at the point where it equals marginal cost? What do you note about the average cost curve at that point? Someone raise their hand and tell me. Yeah. It's the minimum. Entry has driven Dell to the most efficient production level. Entry has driven Dell to produce at the minimum of its average costs, which is the most efficient place it can produce. So it's not like the government mandated Dell produce efficiently, the market delivered it. The market delivered efficient production because entry drove Dell to produce at the point where its average costs were minimized. Yeah?
Not just a construct of the way that you just laid out the graphs.
Well, okay, so how do we know I didn't just set this up? So basically, we know that for the following reasons. First of all, we proved last time Dell producer price equals marginal cost. Right? We know that. We know that if price is greater than average cost, there's profit to be made. So we know that there'll continue to be entry until price equals average cost, so there's no more profit to be made. And we also know that marginal cost crosses average cost at the minimum of average cost by the definition of marginal and average. Right? That's just definitional, that marginal cost is always going to hit the minimum of the average cost. Whenever average cost is falling, marginal cost is rising, vice versa. So basically, by those three facts, since price has to equal marginal cost, since price is driven equal average cost, and since marginal cost hits the minimum of the average cost, we've just proven that there's no profit, that price will equal the minimum of average cost, and they'll produce at that level. Okay? Questions about that?